Chapter 19. Then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in purple robe. And they began to come up to him and say, Hail, King of the Jews, and to give him blows on the face. Pilate came out again and said to them, Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him. So he physically punished him as much as he could. 39 lashings with the cat o' nine tails, and then this mocking crown of thorns upon him, and then a purple robe, a robe of royalty, was laid upon his open flesh, and then he's led out to them. Again, oddly enough, Pilate is doing as much as he can not wanting to kill Jesus because he doesn't find any guilt in him. So I think he presents Jesus this way to them, believing that they're going to say, okay, that's enough. That's enough. He's learned his lesson. Jesus, verse 5. Jesus therefore came out wearing the crown of thorns and purple robe. And Pilate said, Behold the man. When therefore the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried, Crucify, crucify. Pilate said to him, Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him. Now this is the third time he said he doesn't find him guilty. The Jews answered him, said, We have a law, but that law we have a law, and by that law he ought to die because he made himself out to be the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard this statement, he was more afraid. He entered into the promenade again and said to Jesus, Where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to them, Do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you? Jesus answered, You would have no authority over me unless it was given to you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me up to you has the greater sin. As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar. So now they're playing the political card. When Pilate therefore heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at the place called the Provement, above, but in Hebrew it is called Gabbatha. Verse 14. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, Behold your king. They therefore cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to him, I shall crucify your king? The chief priest said, We have no king but Caesar. What a sad statement. This is all political. Their king should have been Yahweh, God. But yet, they're aligning themselves with the Romans in order to get something done that they can't do for themselves. Verse 16, So they delivered him to them to be crucified. And they took Jesus, therefore, he went out, bearing his own cross to the place called the place of the skull, which is in Hebrew called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 other men, one on either side, and Jesus in between. Pilate wrote on the inscription also and put it on the cross. It was written, Jesus the Nazarene, the King of the Jews. Therefore this inscription many of the Jews read, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. And so the chief priests of the Jews were saying to Pilate, Do not write King of the Jews, but he said, I am the King of the Jews. Pilate answered, What I have written, I have written. The soldiers, therefore, when they had crucified Jesus, took his outer garments and made 4 parts, as a part for every soldier. And so and also the tunic. Now the tunic was seamlessly woven from one piece. They said therefore to one another, let us not tear it, but cast lots for it, to decide which one it shall go to. That the scriptures might be fulfilled, they divided my outer garments among them. For my clothing they cast lots. So even the very fact that these cruel executors are going to cast lots for his clothing was prophesied in the Old Testament. Verse 25, therefore the soldiers did these things, but there was standing by the cross of Jesus, his mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby. So this is John, the actual gospel writer here. So he is the only disciple who's at Jesus during his crucifixion. All the other disciples ran away after he was arrested. Peter was there but denied him and ran away in shame. The other ones could have come back at this moment, but they don't. Only John is there with the mother of Jesus and a couple other ladies. So now this interaction happens. Verse 26, when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing by, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. And he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her into his household. And so John, the disciple, the apostle, now takes care of the mother of Jesus until her death. Jesus makes 7 statements on the cross. There's only 3 recorded in the book of John. This being one of them. Verse 28, after this, Jesus, knowing that all things had already been accomplished, in order that Scripture might be fulfilled, said, I am thirsty. So, in my mind, I'm thinking Jesus being all-knowing, Jesus being God, knows exactly the prophecies that have to be fulfilled. And there's many of them. The places of his birth, the things he's going to do, the things he's going to say, how the last week and this arrest thing is all going to play out. All those prophecies have to be fulfilled. And Jesus now knows that it's coming near the end, that all those have been fulfilled. Verse 29, a jar of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of sour wine upon a branch of hyssop and brought it up to his mouth. When Jesus therefore had received the sour wine, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now this is the Passover. There's 4 Passovers in the book of John. This is the last one. He is the Lord of life here. He gives up his life as a ransom for many. Verse 31, the Jews therefore, because it was the day of preparation, so that the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was a high day, asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. The way you die on crucifixion is you die of suffocation, because the way your body is laid, you have to push up every time you breathe because it's restricting your chest and so causing more and more pain. And eventually you run out of energy and you can no longer push yourself up to breathe and you die from suffocation. Well, to speed up that process so you can't push up on your legs, they would break the legs of the prisoners and that would speed up their death. It happened to the other 2 prisoners, the other 2 people being crucified, but not for Jesus, for at this moment, Jesus had already passed. Again, to fulfill Scripture, that none of his bones would be broken. Verse 32, the soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other man who was crucified with him. But coming to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. They did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately there came out blood and water. They wanted to double check that he was dead, and so they did, and it confirmed it. And he, being John, who has seen, has borne witness, and his witness is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you also may believe. The reason John records all this is for one purpose, that you might believe, and believing in Jesus Christ, you might have everlasting life. Verse 36, for these things came to pass that the scripture might be fulfilled, not a bone on him shall be broken. And again, another scripture says, they shall look upon him whom they have pierced. The very fact that the soldiers are going to pierce his side just to double check that he's dead was an actual fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. Verse 38. And after these things, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but a secret one for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take the body of Jesus, and Pilate granted permission. And he came therefore and took away his body. And Nicodemus came also, who had first come to him by night, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, and about 100 pounds in weight. So, now we have two secret disciples, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, part of the Sanhedrin. They're coming forward at the end and asking to take care of the body of this person they've been secretly following. Verse 40. So they took the body of Jesus and bound him in linen wrappings with the spices, and the burial, as is the burial custom of the Jews. Now in the place where he had been crucified there was a garden, and in the garden there was a new tomb which no one had been laid in yet. Therefore, on account of the Jewish day of preparation, because the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. So they need to hurry up and get all this done and completed before the Passover was going to happen. And so we see two secret disciples stepping up and helping with that to make sure that's accomplished by the end of that day. Okay, that's chapter 19.